morning, friends. Welcome back to Heartscapes, where we're growing gardens and practicing Reiki to be rooted, spacious, connected, and to remember ourselves. My name is Michaela. Welcome back to the garden. It's a really glorious morning, just clear blue skies after a few weeks of rain. The birds are chirping, the sun is rising back there. Got my coffee and just wanted to sit down with y'all in the garden and just have a little morning chat. You might be sitting down to join me in this chat on one or the other of my two channels, one focused on gardening, one focused on practicing the system of Reiki for self-healing. And that's because the topic of this conversation kind of applies in both spaces. So just wanted to open the door in both of those spaces. There is, of course, a lot of overlap between those areas of my life, and I often talk about that on these channels. And it's lovely to be able to cross-pollinate that a little bit. So I wanted to talk about something that's really filling me with encouragement today. And I'm hoping that it can serve some encouragement to some of you as well. Because there's some things about, living a life that is values aligned, that is, pushing into areas of the way that we live our life that's different from the mainstream, that kind of steps outside of the way that things are done by most people. My cat Remus is going to join us for this conversation. Sir, you're too big. You don't fit. There's always some cat around. Where was I? When we are living in a way that's values aligned, it can feel incredibly good. It should feel incredibly good, right? It should feel well aligned. It should feel a little bit easy in some ways when we're not pushing up against, our own heart, our own feelings of what's right and the way that things should be done. And it can be really challenging because especially when this is happening in areas of life that are very visible, such as being an urban homesteader or shifting your work life to, focusing on healing rather than working an office job, which is what I did when I opened Hardscapes. When it's public facing like that, we can receive a lot of discouragement and a lot of, confusion and sometimes condemnation from the people around us. And it can make it, even more difficult to live a life that has its own weight, its own challenges to it. And so when we can find things that reflect back the value of living in that way, particularly the value that exists outside of our own self, because, hopefully we can feel the value for ourself, right? The value of, in the case of urban homesteading, of cultivating our own food, of living more lightly on the land with more respect to the land, by learning skills and learning to do things ourselves that we otherwise would be reliant on other people to do, to lean into community and community sufficiency over individualism. These are things that, feel really good to us and have their rewards in our personal life. And they are things that ripple outward into the people around us. And it's that piece that is encouraging me so much today. And I wanted to just sit down and kind of talk about that and tell the story of why that is today. Because the fact is, we're influencing people all the time. I talk about this in my Reiki teaching a lot, that anytime we enter a space with other people, with or without other people, we change the room, right? Anytime we enter a room, we change the room. Our emotions, our energy, the way that we're talking, the way that we show up, the things that we're focusing attention on, all of these things influence the people who are there, whether or not we intend to, whether or not that's a positive influence. And that goes for kind of the larger scope of our life as well. The way that we live our life influences the people around us. Of course, it can't help but, we are connected species and we influence each other. And that influence is happening whether or not we know it, whether or not we ever hear about it. But every once in a while, we do get feedback about the ways in which we have influenced other people, the positive impact we've had on their life. And that can be incredibly encouraging. So as I've shared in other videos, I've been, I would say I've been dabbling in urban homesteading. I've been learning about and working towards striving for that lifestyle for about 26 years or so. And, even before that, into my teen and early 20s years, I was spending a lot of time in nature. I grew up in the Bay Area, really beautiful natural spaces. And my ex-husband and I, with our little daughter and his nephew, would often go out into natural spaces. And for a long time in the kids' youth, our nephew Solly was a really important part of our family. I have two daughters, but if there was ever anybody who felt like my son, it was Solly. We took him and our daughter Gaia camping every summer, scrambled around in rivers and in oceans. And the two of them helped me to plant my very first garden. And, I had the privilege of watching that young man grow up, become absolutely obsessed with soccer. He started playing soccer very young and continued playing quite seriously into adulthood. He traveled the world playing soccer and ultimately played soccer professionally for a few years. And, me and his uncle separated about 10 years ago. And so I wasn't getting as much time connecting with that family as I had before. I'm deeply grateful that my ex-husband's family still considers me family. And I do get to spend time with them from time to time, which is really a blessing. But I'd heard that Solly had stopped playing soccer, which was surprising to me because this was, his life goal. It was something he'd worked on so hard for so long. I was really curious to talk to him about it. And I got that opportunity last year at his great grandmother's 100th birthday party. Such a joyful occasion. She just turned 101 in January of this year. But last year, Solly and I got to catch up, and I learned some really exciting things. Number one, this wise young man who's now about 26, 27, had chosen to retire early from soccer because he didn't want to wreck his body, right? He knows what happens to professional athletes when they, go as far as they can in the game and, retire because of injury because they've wrecked their body. He didn't want to do that. He wanted to retire strong and healthy. And he wanted to turn his attention, in his words, to something that really mattered, to something that really left an impact on community and, it felt like it had something meaningful to offer. So what he did was he moved to New Mexico. He started going to school for environmental science and permaculture and regenerative agriculture and began working on a community farm. Now, this tickled me and was so delightful. And I asked him more questions about that. And, really dug into this experience that he was having. So fast forward a year to yesterday. And I got together with this family to celebrate Solly and his wife's first baby. They had a baby shower. They're about 4 months into this pregnancy. So again, joyous occasion, beautiful family gathering with all the people. And, we got to talking again, checking in on how his studies were going. And in that check-in, he said to me, he said, "Look, Auntie, I'm in a time of life when I'm able to look back on my childhood and to really start to see the ways in which certain aspects of my early childhood are directly influencing the way that my life is shaping up. And all of those times that you took me camping, all of those trips to the beach, all of those hours spent in the garden and spent in the kitchen really, really influenced me. It gave me this perspective as a child that those things matter. And now, as an adult, when I looked for a life path that would matter, that's what I went back to. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing now." And when I tell you how I choked up at that, my auntie's heart just so very, very happy and humbled and gratified and encouraged, so encouraged to hear that. I shared previously a video that talked about why I entered gardening and homesteading. Ultimately, why I entered healing fields like Reiki and adjusted my work life to be focused in that way. And it really came out of traumatic experiences. It came out of absolutely needing to turn my attention to something life-giving, something that would feel like it mattered, something that I had some control over that was good. And so those early memories of the garden they're a little conflicted for me, you know? Yes, it was very exciting getting into this new endeavor and learning new things and having all the benefits of being in the garden. But it was coming out of this place of deep fear and deep anger and deep despair and uncertainty about the future. And so it's a little harder for me to see kind of the purity of that time, because of those memories and the way that they're blended together. And I'm not mad about that. I'm so grateful that I chose to turn to the garden, to turn towards life, in moments when I was feeling all of those ways. And so to hear that time of life reflected back to me from the perspective of a tiny innocent child who had no idea about any of those difficult things going on and simply was able to receive that influence in this pivotal time in his life, that this became a refuge to turn towards. And a refuge that mattered so much to him that when, 20 something years later, he looked on his life and said, what can I turn my path towards that will matter, that will have significance? Those were the memories that he looked back at. So I want to encourage you that living from a place of your values and what you know is right, and how how your heart sings when you turn yourself towards it, even if it seems like you're not getting any validation from the people around you or from the culture around you, that nevertheless you're casting influence into the world that matters. You might never know it. You might never hear back from those people. But when you're living your life from your values, you can see it in the way that other people respond. And I think that can be really helpful to us when we're feeling discouraged. I was watching another one of the other YouTube channels that I watch for homesteading, Honeybee Hollow. Really lovely, really beautiful homesteading channel. And she was doing a Q&A video, and somebody had asked, why do you spend your time doing this? Why do you spend your time in a lifestyle that is so inconvenient? And part of me kind of rankled at that a little bit, but I was like, no, they're right. Like, a homesteading lifestyle, even an urban one in the middle of the city has a lot of inconvenience. It takes a lot of time. Yes, it's convenient to go out in the back and gather some eggs and some tomatoes without having to go to the store. But how many hours went into producing those things, right? How many hours not spent working or doing anything else went into preparing the space for those conveniences to be present? It can be a very hard and very inconvenient lifestyle. Similarly, working in, a healing field, moving away from university work to, start my own business, very inconvenient. A lot of things about it that are really challenging. And so it can be so important to see, from a little bit of a wider distance, why it matters that we make those choices. It matters for a lot of reasons, but again, the way that we influence people is one of them. My own daughter, Gaia, who's a couple of years younger than Sully, they grew up together going on all of these adventures. She's now working at my best friend's farm. She's helping to run their warehouse and do deliveries and help to take in orders. They consolidate produce from local small organic farms in the area so that they can sell them to larger customers, primarily school districts. And Gaia helps to run their warehouse and to run their farm stand. This is a completely new field for her. She's also casting around, looking at where she wants to spend her life. And this is the first job she's had that felt like they're really applying their labors towards something that matters. That all of the people she works with are passionate about the mission of the organization. And she's learning a ton about farming, about food, about nutrition. She's starting to cook for herself for the first time. So I'm seeing in closer proximity this influence, the way that all these years it seemed like she wasn't really paying attention to what mom was doing, and didn't really want to live in that way, didn't particularly have any interest. And yet all of a sudden that influence blooms. And so as we were sitting at the baby shower yesterday, there was this moment when I was sitting with kind of their generation of cousins. So my daughter Gaia, Sali, his wife Ellie, and my niece Isis. And these four young people, all between the ages of 24 and 27, all of them are working in fields that are in the realm of holistic health. Isis is a massage therapist working in hospital. Ellie is in medical school studying to be an osteopath and a holistic medical practitioner. Sully, of course, doing environmental engineering and restorative agriculture. Gaia working with food distribution, working with schools and nutrition education. And they're all so passionate about it. And they're all so clear that the course that they've chosen is good and right. Even though, when I was their age, those professions were seen as kind of fringe, as kind of odd, right? It was just this really gratifying moment, I'm at that age where I can be like, the young people today, and I was having a, feeling hope for the future, seeing these young people taking on these paths and, hearing from their own mouths, at least a couple of them, the influence that just being in this lifestyle with our family has had on them. So I just wanted to, sit down on this beautiful morning with the birds chirping, with a cup of coffee, and just, encourage you to look for those places of influence, especially if you're feeling discouraged, especially if you're feeling like, going against the grain is too hard. If your garden is overrun and it's absolutely overwhelming you, kicking your butt, and you're like, gosh, maybe I shouldn't even be doing this. Look for the places where the fact that you are living your values and you're living them out loud and in a somewhat public way is influencing the people around you in ways that matter, in ways that change their life, and ultimately maybe yours as well. It's really a sweet moment. So that's what I've got for you today. I hope you are well. I hope you are thriving. I hope you're encouraged. And I hope as this springtime begins to come alive, wherever you are in the world, that you feel deeply provisioned for whatever is in store for you. Thank you so much for being with me. Until next time, I love you. Goodbye.